Hello, lovely sleepyheads, and welcome back to Boring Sleepy History. So glad you're here tonight, or perhaps this morning, depending on your wonderfully chaotic sleep schedules. Settle in, snuggle up, maybe grab a warm drink. Let's get utterly, delightfully comfy. Where are you listening from right now? Is it twilight where you are? Or is the sun already painting the world in the soft hues of dawn? Wherever you are, I hope you're wrapped in cozy warmth and feeling perfectly peaceful. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Sleepy Tales. It helps this little channel grow, and I truly appreciate each and every one of you joining me on these sleepy historical journeys. Now, imagine the scorching Egyptian sun beating down on your back, the air thick with dust, and the endless drone of human toil echoes across the barren landscape. You're not a pharaoh, not a noble, not even a skilled craftsman. You're just Non. Non, the quarry worker, Non, the farmer, Non, the temple servant. 3 different lives, bound together by the colossal weight of a single block of limestone, destined for a grand temple. Tonight, we'll follow that stone, its journey from the earth to the Nile, to the heart of a god's domain. A journey reflecting the immense, often forgotten labor that built the glory of ancient Egypt. Let's begin. The intense heat of the midday sun hits him as he squints, the smell of sun-baked limestone and sweat already thick in the air, a stark contrast to the cool shade of his dwelling just moments ago. My sandals, already dusty from the short walk, felt hot against my feet. The air hung heavy and still, shimmering above the white expanse of the quarry. It was a day like many others, a day for breaking stone. The rhythmic clang of mallets against limestone, a familiar and almost comforting percussion, already filled the air. I joined the other men, their bodies already glistening with perspiration. We were a silent assembly, each lost in the repetitive rhythm of our work. The copper chisel felt cool and smooth against my calloused palm, a fleeting contrast to the rough texture of the stone itself. Each blow required precision and strength, a careful dance of leverage and impact. A misplaced strike could break the chisel, or worse, injure a fellow worker. The fear, a dull ache under my ribs, was a constant companion. The dust, a fine white powder, clung to everything, our clothes, our skin, even the air itself. It filled my mouth with each shallow breath, tasting gritty and unpleasant. My throat was parched already, the watered-down beer from breakfast a distant memory. I glanced at the man working next to me, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was a strong man, but even he seemed to be tiring under the relentless sun. The work was hard, back-breaking, but we were all united by our shared purpose, to extract the stone, our duty. Today's task was a particularly large block, its surface scarred with the markings of previous attempts. Our foreman, a grim-faced man with years of sun damage etched onto his face, had designated this block for our team. We worked in a coordinated fashion, a silent ballet of precision. One man would use a chisel to score the stone, creating lines of weakness. Then another would lever the stone with a long bar. The rhythmic hammering continued, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the quarry. The sheer scale of the stone block, a behemoth of white limestone, dwarfed us. A sudden sharp crack echoed through the quarry, followed by a collective grunt of effort. A section of the stone began to separate, the air thick with anticipation. We held our breath, this monumental piece of the earth about to shift. It was a slow, deliberate process. The immense weight of the stone threatened to resist our efforts, but the combined strength of our teamwork finally triumphed. With a groan of stone against stone, the block broke free. A sense of satisfaction, brief and fleeting, washed over me. A brief respite from the aching muscles and the relentless sun. But even in the short moment, the heat remained, and I was still covered in dust. Another piece separated from the rock face, soon to embark on its long journey. The sun continued its unrelenting assault. The work continued. The midday sun beat down on my neck, the sweat stinging my eyes as I chipped away at the stubborn limestone. The rhythmic clang of hammers, the grunts of exertion, the familiar symphony of the quarry seemed muted, almost distant. A shadow fell across the blinding white stone. I looked up. A messenger stood there, his sandals kicking up a small cloud of dust. His face was drawn and tight, the lines etched deep by the sun, deeper still by something else, something heavier than the weight of the stone we hewed from the earth. He didn't speak at first, just stared, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The other workers stopped their work, their faces mirroring my own apprehension. The air, thick with the usual smells of sweat and dust, now carried a strange, sharp tang of fear. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the slow, steady rhythm of the quarry. The sun seemed to burn hotter, the stone colder beneath my hands. Finally, the messenger spoke, his voice a low, strained whisper that barely carried over the sudden silence. "The pharaohs decree," he rasped, his words hitting me like blows. "All able-bodied men are summoned. The Nile, the corvée." The corvée. The word hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket of dread. Each year, the Nile's capricious nature demanded its tribute. The annual flooding, a life-giving blessing, also brought with it the forced labor, a brutal reminder of our dependence on the river and the pharaoh's absolute power. It was a part of life, a certainty as inevitable as the sun's rise and fall. Yet it never grew easier. The news spread like wildfire through the quarry. Murmurs, groans, and the occasional choked sob rippled through the assembled men. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, a sickening twist of anxiety. My small mud brick home, the scent of my wife's cooking, the laughter of my children. Images flashed before my eyes, precious moments soon to be distant memories. The messenger continued, his words painting a bleak picture of the journey ahead. Weeks of back-breaking labor, hauling colossal stones under the relentless sun. The constant threat of injury, the uncertainty of return. He spoke of the barges, the Nile's unpredictable currents, the harsh discipline of the overseers. His words were a litany of hardship, a chilling prelude to the ordeal that awaited us. The faces around me were grim, etched with a mixture of fear and resignation. The weight of the stone I'd been working on felt suddenly insignificant compared to the weight of this news, a crushing burden on my chest. I glanced at the unfinished block, its rough surface mirroring the roughness of my own feelings. How long would I be gone? Would I ever see my family again? These questions, old friends of anxiety, gnawed at me. The rhythmic clang of the hammers resumed, now a mournful dirge accompanying the unspoken grief and dread that hung heavy over us. It was time to go. The air hung heavy, thick with the dust kicked up by our boots as we trudged towards the Nile. The sun beat down relentlessly, baking the earth to a hard, unforgiving crust. Each step was a small victory against the weight of the stone, a colossal beast of white limestone we hauled on our wooden sledge. The ropes bit into my shoulders, a familiar ache that competed with the thirst clawing at my throat. My mouth felt like sandpaper, the taste of dust and sweat a constant companion. I swallowed hard, the meager remains of my breakfast, a dry piece of bread, doing little to quench my parched tongue. A low, mournful song, carried on the desert wind from a distant village, stirred a wave of homesickness within me. A poignant reminder of the life I was leaving behind, the small mud brick house clinging to the edge of the fields, the familiar scent of my wife's cooking, the laughter of my children. The song, a melody both haunting and beautiful, seemed to pierce the harsh reality of my present circumstances. It was a sound woven from longing and loss, resonating deep within my soul. It spoke of hearth and home, a world away from this endless expanse of sand and sun-scorched earth. I glanced at my fellow laborers. Their faces, etched with the same weariness as mine, reflected the burden of this task, this forced pilgrimage from our fields and families to the pharaohs' grand project. They too carried the weight of their own silent sorrows. We moved as one, a silent, sweating mass of muscle and bone, bound together by a common fate and a shared burden. Yet in this shared misery, I found a sliver of solace, a silent bond forged in the crucible of our hardship. Knowing others shared the ache in their hearts made the journey somehow less isolating. The rhythmic creak of the sledge, the grunting of our bodies, and the steady drone of our footfalls provided a strangely comforting counterpoint to the haunting melody drifting from the village. It was a reminder of the relentless rhythm of life, the constant push and pull between hardship and hope. The sun, now beginning its slow descent towards the horizon, cast long shadows that stretched and danced across the endless dunes. The shifting light painted the landscape in shades of orange and purple, a spectacle both grand and indifferent to our struggles. But the beauty of the sunset could not quite erase the ache in my heart. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, inhaling the scent of the desert, a scent both familiar and alien, trying to conjure the smell of my home, a fragrance so far away it seemed a dream. As twilight painted the sky in soft hues of purple and gold, the song faded, swallowed by the growing darkness and the cacophony of the desert night. Yet the melody remained imprinted on my memory, a tender echo of the life I had left behind. The promise of rest loomed, a small comfort in the face of the vast, unknown future. The air grew cooler as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The relentless heat of the day began to ease, replaced by a gentle breeze that carried with it the scent of damp earth and the distant smoke of cooking fires. My muscles, screaming in protest just hours ago, now ached with a dull, persistent throb. Each step was a testament to the day's exertion, but the pain was strangely comforting, a tangible reminder of the work accomplished. The rough rope, chafing against my calloused hands, felt less like an irritant and more like a familiar companion. We continued our slow, laborious progress. The immense weight of the stone, which had felt insurmountable during the midday heat, now seemed less oppressive, almost manageable under the growing twilight. The rhythmic creak of the sledge, the heavy thud of its runners against the uneven ground, filled the air with a monotonous yet oddly soothing sound. It was a sound that had been with me all day, the soundtrack to our shared burden. As the first stars began to prick the darkening sky, the rhythmic chanting of other hauling teams, moving unseen in the growing twilight, drifted to me, a strangely comforting sound in the vast emptiness. It was a shared symphony of exertion, a testament to the collective effort that bound us together. We were not alone in our struggle. Others, unseen, yet felt so very close, were engaged in the same back-breaking labor, their voices a beacon in the gathering darkness. It was a strange solace, this shared burden, this symphony of toil. Thirst gnawed at my throat, a familiar torment. My tongue felt thick and dry, coated with the dust that had settled on everything. I tasted grit, the lingering reminder of the meager bread and watered-down beer that had been our breakfast. The memory prompted a pang of longing for my family, for the simple comforts of my small mud-brick home. But the thought was fleeting. I pushed the longing aside, focusing on the task at hand, on the rhythmic swing of my arms, on the steady progress we were making. One of the men beside me stumbled, his foot catching on a loose stone. A sharp cry escaped his lips as he fell, but he quickly regained his footing, helped by his fellow workers. It was a silent reminder of the constant risk, the ever-present danger. A shared understanding passed between us, a silent agreement to support each other, to pull together. We were bound not only by the task, but by a shared vulnerability. The sky above us was now a blanket of stars, breathtaking in their brilliance. Their silent, unwavering presence offered a different kind of solace, a connection to something larger than ourselves. The vastness of the night seemed to mirror the immensity of the task ahead, and yet, paradoxically, it felt intimate and personal, shared among the men who toiled beneath them. Slowly, ever so slowly, we were inching closer to the Nile. I could feel the pull of the river, its proximity promising a respite from the relentless journey. The rough-hewn wood of the sledge dug into my shoulder, a familiar ache that had become a constant companion these past weeks. The rhythmic creak of the wood, the grunts of the men straining beside me, the monotonous scrape of the stone against the unforgiving earth, all had lulled me into a brief, uneasy sleep. The cool night air had been a welcome respite from the relentless sun, though the dampness clinging to the ground had seeped into my bones. The star-strewn sky, a vast and indifferent canvas above, had offered little comfort, only a sense of the immensity of the task before us. Each star felt like a tiny grain of sand in an endless desert. Then, a sharp cry, a piercing sound that cut through the quiet drone of our labor, a sound filled with pain and fear. It ripped me from the fleeting peace of slumber, jolting me awake with a violent start. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drum against the stillness of the pre-dawn hour. I looked to the source of the cry. One of my fellow workers, his face pale and contorted in agony, clutched at his leg. A deep gash, already seeping blood, marred his skin. He cried out again, a low, guttural moan that was swallowed by the vastness of the desert. A wave of cold dread washed over me. This was it, the thing we all feared: injury, delay, punishment. The silent pact we had made with each other, the shared burden of the task, had been shattered in an instant. The rhythmic motion of the sledge halted, the steady chant of the workers faltered and died. The air, moments ago thick with the shared effort, became heavy with a suffocating silence. The captain, his face etched with worry, rushed to the injured man's side. He was older, his face lined with the years of hardship endured under this harsh sun, his eyes reflecting the weight of responsibility he carried. He quickly assessed the injury, his movements efficient and practiced. The unspoken question hung in the air, a palpable presence amongst us. Would the delay cost us our lives, or worse, bring down the wrath of those in charge? We all gathered around, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Some offered words of comfort, while others, myself included, simply stared, our faces mirroring the fear and uncertainty churning within us. The captain's hands moved swiftly, tending to the wound. He ripped strips of cloth from his own garment, the rough fabric causing the injured man to wince. I felt a strange mix of pity and fear, a chilling reminder of our own vulnerability. My own body ached. I could feel the strain in my back, the soreness in my arms, the blisters on my hands. But the sudden focus of pain and injury on our fellow worker overshadowed my own discomfort. Slowly, a plan formed. The captain gave instructions, his voice low and steady, despite the tremor of worry in his eyes. Some would remain with the injured man, tending to his wound, keeping him calm, and reassuring him that he wouldn't be left behind. Others, the stronger among us, would continue pulling, trying to make up for lost time. The sense of urgency was palpable. The first rays of dawn had begun to paint the eastern sky, promising a harsh sun to beat down on us. We were in a race against the rising sun and the coming wrath. The injured man's pained groans mingled with the renewed, strained grunting as the sledge started its slow, agonizing journey once more. The rhythm was broken, the silence replaced by a desperate struggle against the weight of the stone, the weight of fear, and the weight of the looming consequences.
The rhythmic creak of the sledge's runners shifting on the uneven ground was a constant companion, a dull, almost hypnotic drone that matched the rhythm of my own breathing. The sun beat down relentlessly, turning the already dusty ground to powder that clung to my sweat-soaked skin. Each step was a battle against the weight, against the friction of the rough earth, against the growing ache in my muscles. We chanted, a low, guttural sound that rose and fell with our strides, a shared breath, a shared burden. It was a comfort in its familiarity, a testament to our collective strength. Then the rhythm broke. A sharp crack, like a bone snapping, sliced through the monotonous drone. It was followed by a sickening groan of wood, a sound that went deep into my bones, a sound that spoke of impending disaster. The sledge lurched, the immense weight of the stone shifting precariously. My heart leaped into my throat, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced the dull ache of exhaustion. I stumbled, my legs momentarily failing under the sudden uneven strain. The chanting ceased, replaced by gasps and muttered exclamations. I looked around, my vision blurring slightly from sweat and sudden panic. My fellow workers, faces strained and etched with worry, were struggling to maintain their footing, their bodies tense as they braced against the shifting weight. The captain, his face a mask of grim determination, yelled a command I couldn't quite decipher, but the urgency was unmistakable. We were dangerously close to the edge of a ravine, a sheer drop into the dusty abyss. If the sledge gave way completely, the stone would plummet, taking some of us with it. The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me, making my hands clammy and my muscles tremble. The air itself seemed to thicken with fear. Slowly, painfully, we managed to stabilize the sledge. The captain, with the help of several others, wedged large stones beneath the broken runner, attempting a makeshift repair. The air was filled with the tense silence of shared fear, broken only by the rasping of breaths and the occasional grunt of strained muscles. The dust swirled around us, a hazy veil obscuring the harsh reality of our predicament. The sun seemed to beat down with even greater intensity, mocking our desperate struggle. The sweat stung my eyes. My throat was parched, my tongue thick and heavy. The taste of dust and fear mingled in my mouth. Despite the relief of preventing immediate disaster, the knowledge that our journey was far from over and the fragility of our current situation hung heavy in the air like a shroud. The weight of the stone, both literally and figuratively, seemed to have increased tenfold. We continued, moving with a renewed, cautious determination, each step measured and deliberate. The rhythm returned, but it was a different rhythm now, slower, more hesitant, carrying the undercurrent of a shared, lingering fear. The air, thick and heavy with the promise of rain, hung low over the parched earth. For days, the sun had beaten down mercilessly, baking the ground to a hard, cracked crust. Now, a different kind of pressure built, a suffocating weight pressing down from above. The wind, previously still, stirred with an unsettling energy, whipping dust devils across the desolate landscape. Then it began. Not a gentle shower, not a soft patter against the parched earth, but a deluge. A violent, unrelenting downpour that instantly transformed the familiar world into a chaotic, treacherous scene. The sun, momentarily obscured, cast a strange, ethereal light, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry gray. The dust, usually a constant companion, was instantly subdued, replaced by slick, muddy rivers that snaked their way across the path. Then it began. Not a gentle shower, not a soft patter against the parched earth, but a deluge. A violent, unrelenting downpour that instantly transformed the familiar world into a chaotic, treacherous scene. The sun, momentarily obscured, cast a strange, ethereal light, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry gray. The dust, usually a constant companion, was instantly subdued, replaced by slick, muddy rivers that snaked their way across the path. The sledge, already strained to its limit, groaned under the weight of the stone and the onslaught of rain. The ropes, usually taut and strong, became slick and treacherous, threatening to slip from our grasp. The chanting, our rhythmic counterpoint to the endless labor, died in our throats. Fear, sharp and immediate, replaced the dull ache of exhaustion. We had no choice but to abandon our efforts. The stone, immovable now, was trapped in the mud. The downpour was relentless. Seeking shelter became our primary concern. The nearby outcropping, a small rocky formation that offered little protection, became our refuge. We huddled together, a mass of shivering bodies wrapped in our thin linen garments, offering each other what little warmth we could. The rain hammered against the rock, a deafening roar that drowned out all other sounds. The wind howled like a banshee, a constant reminder of nature's raw power. I could feel the cold seep into my bones, a stark contrast to the burning sun of only moments before. The muddy water trickled down my neck, chilling me to the core. My fellow workers, faces streaked with mud and rain, huddled closer, their breaths misting in the cold air. Silence fell, broken only by the relentless rhythm of the rain. We sat there, lost in the fury of the storm, our shared predicament forging a bond tighter than any rope. The monumental task we had undertaken, the seemingly insurmountable obstacle of moving this colossal stone, felt insignificant in the face of such raw, untamed power. We were just tiny figures, insignificant against the might of nature. The weight of the stone, so immense just moments ago, seemed light in comparison to the fear that gripped us, a fear of not only failure, but of annihilation. Through the downpour, I saw a flash of lightning illuminate the landscape, briefly revealing the sheer immensity of the rain-soaked fields stretching to the horizon. The landscape seemed to pulse with power, alive and dangerous. Even the great Nile, usually a comforting presence, was now a swollen, roaring torrent, a visible threat. Slowly, the storm began to relent. The rain lessened, then tapered off to a mere drizzle. The wind subsided, replaced by an eerie quiet. The world, transformed by the storm, was shrouded in a mist, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and the lingering threat of more rain. We emerged from our shelter, dripping and chilled, to survey the damage. The mud clung to our clothes, weighing us down, a stark reminder of the day's ordeal. Yet, amidst the devastation, a quiet resilience settled over us, a testament to our shared experience and our shared determination. We had survived the storm. The stone would wait.
The wind, still carrying the scent of rain-washed earth, had quieted to a low whisper. The sky, once a furious canvas of gray, now showed hesitant patches of blue, the setting sun painting them with soft hues of orange and rose. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, yet heavy with the lingering dampness. My body, stiff and aching, felt the chill bite deeper than before. The colossal stone, thankfully, remained secure on the makeshift raft, though the ropes were strained and waterlogged. My fellow sailors huddled close, shivering, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. We were soaked to the bone, our clothes clinging like a second skin. Hunger, a gnawing emptiness, had begun to press upon us, a sharper discomfort than the cold. We had shared our meager rations days ago. Then, from the village nestled amongst the date palms on the riverbank, a lone figure emerged. An old woman, her face etched with the wisdom and hardship of years spent under the relentless desert sun, walked towards us with a steady gait that belied her age.
She carried 2 large bowls, their earthenware steaming gently, the aroma drifting towards us on the cool breeze. It was a rich, savory scent, a comforting blend of herbs and spices, something hearty and warm that promised respite from the gnawing hunger. As she approached, the woman offered us the steaming bowls. The broth within was a thick, dark mixture, flecked with unfamiliar vegetables and small pieces of meat. It was hot, almost painfully so, but the warmth seeped into my chilled bones, a soothing balm against the lingering cold. The first spoonful was a revelation, a symphony of flavors that awakened my palate, a welcome contrast to the blandness of our usual fare. Each mouthful was a small act of kindness, a testament to the compassion of a stranger in a land where survival was a daily struggle. My fellow sailors ate with a quiet intensity, the rhythmic slurping of the broth a counterpoint to the gentle lapping of the river against the barge. The old woman, watching us, smiled a small, knowing smile. Her eyes, though crinkled with age, held a depth of understanding that transcended words. It wasn't just the nourishment the broth provided, it was the feeling of shared humanity, the unspoken recognition of our common struggle against the elements that filled me with a quiet gratitude. As I finished the last spoonful, a sense of deep contentment settled over me. My body still ached, my clothes were still damp, but the gnawing hunger was gone, replaced by a warmth that spread from my stomach to my very soul. The storm had tested our resilience, but this simple act of kindness had restored a sense of hope, reminding me that even in the harshest of circumstances, compassion could bloom, a small flower of empathy in a desert of hardship. The old woman, her task complete, simply nodded, a silent farewell, and turned to walk back towards her village, leaving us with our renewed strength and a renewed sense of hope. The stars, now emerging in the darkening sky, felt brighter, the night less daunting than before. The Nile flowed on, a dark ribbon under the vast star-studded sky. The air, though still carrying the dampness of the recent storm, held a new stillness, a quiet, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the barge's hull and the occasional creak of its timbers. My fellow sailors, exhausted but relieved, slept soundly, their breaths a soft rhythm against the night. I, however, found sleep elusive. The storm's fury had left a lingering tension in my muscles, a restless energy that kept me awake. I sat up, leaning against a stack of woven reed mats, and gazed out at the endless expanse of the river. The stars, brighter than I'd ever seen them, felt close enough to touch. The silence, heavy and profound, was almost oppressive. Then it came. A distant, rhythmic drumming. Not the steady, familiar beat of the work songs we'd chanted while hauling the stone, nor the frantic calls of the river birds. This was different. A deeper, more resonant sound, as if the earth itself was throbbing. It pulsed slowly at first, a low, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to resonate through the very bones of the barge. Then it grew stronger, more insistent, the steady beat building into a hypnotic rhythm. It wasn't unpleasant, not exactly. There was a strange power to it, a primal force that both intrigued and unsettled me. It stirred something deep within me, a sense of anticipation tinged with apprehension. I couldn't place it. It wasn't the music of any village I'd ever passed, nor the sounds of any celebration I'd ever witnessed. It felt ancient, almost mystical. The other sailors stirred, their sleep broken by the unfamiliar sound. Murmurs rippled through the small group. A few mumbled questions were exchanged, but no one had an answer. The old sailor, usually so quick with a tale or a joke, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon from where the drumming seemed to emanate. Even he seemed perplexed. The drumming continued, growing steadily louder as we drifted closer to its source. The night, once peaceful, now held a palpable sense of expectancy, a strange energy that crackled in the air. The river, previously a source of calm, now felt almost alive, its current seemingly pulling us inexorably towards the unknown. My own unease grew with each echoing beat. What was it? A ritual? A warning? A celebration? The images that sprung to my mind were indistinct, shadowy figures moving in the darkness, a monumental structure looming under the stars. It felt significant, like the drumming was a message, a summons, and I, along with the rest of the crew, was somehow caught within its reach. The weight of the stone, forgotten for a time during the storm, pressed down on me anew. Not only the physical weight, but a weight of the unknown, of the anticipation of what awaited us at journey's end. The drumming filled the night, a steady, powerful pulse against the silence of the river, drawing us ever closer to its source. The rhythmic beat resonated not only in my ears, but in my very soul.
As dawn breaks, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking sight unfolds before us. The colossal, unfinished temple complex rises before us like a mountain range sculpted from stone, a testament to human ambition and a source of both awe and overwhelming intimidation. The scale is simply beyond anything I've ever witnessed. Rows upon rows of colossal pillars, some already standing proud, others still lying in heaps waiting their turn to be raised, stretch as far as the eye can see. The air hums with activity. The shouts of foremen, the rhythmic clang of hammers, the creak of ropes and pulleys, a symphony of labor echoing across the vast expanse. The barge groans and creaks as we approach the shore, the water lapping gently against the hull. The smell of river mud is suddenly overpowered by the pungent aroma of incense, a strange, heady perfume hanging heavy in the air. As we disembark, the ground beneath my feet is firm and hard-packed earth, a welcome change from the swaying deck of the barge. The sun, now fully risen, beats down mercilessly, but the sheer scale of the construction project dwarfs even its intensity. Men swarm like ants, each seemingly focused on a single, minute task. I see some shaping stones with tools as finely honed as a surgeon's blade, others hauling massive blocks with ropes and levers. Still others mix mud, carrying baskets brimming with the wet earth, their faces smeared with brown. The sheer weight of the stone block we carried feels insignificant now, a tiny pebble compared to the monumental stones already in place. A feeling of vertigo washes over me. This place is so grand, so imposing.
It feels almost unnatural. The air itself vibrates with the energy of thousands of people, a collective effort so vast it's almost impossible to grasp. It's beautiful in a terrifying way, a monument to the power of the pharaoh and to the countless hours of sweat and toil that have gone into its creation. My fellow sailors and I are herded towards a group of overseers. They survey us with the same dispassionate gaze they would give a pile of rocks. We are, after all, just another part of this immense construction project. I feel a pang of fear as we are assigned our next tasks. Not the noble work of placing the giant blocks, but the menial tasks of preparing the ground. We're directed to a dusty, sun-baked area, our only tools being simple shovels and crude baskets. This is where we will spend the next many months. I feel a sigh escape my lips, a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. The daunting task before us is not to raise up some great stone, but to simply level the ground beneath the gigantic pillars of the temple, a task seemingly small compared to the overall project, yet still vital to its completion. The magnitude of the entire endeavor weighs heavily on my chest. My heart aches a little, both from the grueling journey and from the thought of how long it will take to finish. Yet, even in the face of this overwhelming task, there is a sense of belonging. The common purpose, shared exhaustion, and the silent camaraderie of my fellow workers offers a strange comfort in this intimidating and powerful place. The sun blazes down, sweat stings my eyes, but somehow it feels different. Here, even this work is imbued with a sense of purpose. The weight on my back now is not just the weight of the physical burden, but the weight of participating in something far larger than myself, a tribute, however humble, to the gods and to the pharaoh.
The pungent aroma of incense, thick and sweet, drifted from the nearby temple, momentarily distracting me from the dust and sweat clinging to my skin. It was a stark contrast to the earthy smells that had permeated my life for so long. The smell of river mud, the scent of sun-baked stone, the ever-present tang of sweat. This new fragrance, rich and exotic, hinted at a world beyond the grueling physical labor, a world of rituals and mysteries. Curiosity, a feeling rarely indulged in during the endless cycle of work, pricked at me. My task for now was simple: to prepare the earth for the next stone. The ground, already leveled by countless others, was surprisingly soft under my calloused feet. I used a simple wooden tool to smooth the surface, feeling the damp earth yield beneath its pressure. The sun beat down relentlessly, but the work was less strenuous than hauling the massive block down the Nile. The rhythm was slower, more deliberate, allowing for moments of quiet contemplation. I glanced towards the temple, a colossal structure of white limestone that seemed to stretch towards the heavens. It was an awe-inspiring sight, a testament to the power and ambition of the pharaoh. I imagined the intricate carvings, the gleaming gold, the powerful priests conducting ceremonies within its sacred halls. The scale of it was almost incomprehensible, making my own small contribution seem utterly insignificant. Yet there was a strange sense of pride in knowing I played a part, however minute, in this grand enterprise. The sounds of the temple were muted, but I could sense a low hum of activity,
a chanting perhaps, or the murmur of many voices. Occasionally, I caught the glimpse of a figure moving within the temple's shadowed courtyard, a priest perhaps, or a servant tending to the many details that sustained this grand edifice. They were figures shrouded in mystery, far removed from the toil of my daily existence. Their lives were a world apart, yet their work was inextricably linked to mine. We were all pieces in this intricate puzzle, each contributing a necessary part. As the sun climbed higher, the heat intensified. My brow beaded with sweat, the taste of grit filling my mouth. Yet the thought of the incense, its exotic sweetness, remained a persistent presence. It offered a momentary escape from the harsh reality of my surroundings, a glimpse into a different realm, a realm of spirituality and mystery. I wondered about the gods they worshipped, the prayers they whispered, the meaning behind the elaborate rituals. The sun began its slow descent towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the earth. My muscles ached, my throat was dry, but a quiet satisfaction settled over me. My work for the day was done. I had completed my part in preparing the ground for another colossal stone, another building block in the grand design of the temple. I looked towards the temple once more, its silhouette darkening against the fiery sky. The sweet scent of incense still hung in the air, a subtle reminder of the sacred purpose of my labors. I felt a strange kinship with this massive structure, a connection forged in sweat and toil, a bond formed through shared purpose. We were all pieces in this intricate puzzle, each contributing a necessary part. As the sun climbed higher, the heat intensified. My brow beaded with sweat, the taste of grit filling my mouth. Yet the thought of the incense, its exotic sweetness, remained a persistent presence. It offered a momentary escape from the harsh reality of my surroundings, a glimpse into a different realm, a realm of spirituality and mystery. I wondered about the gods they worshipped, the prayers they whispered, the meaning behind the elaborate rituals. The sun began its slow descent towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the earth. My muscles ached, my throat was dry, but a quiet satisfaction settled over me. My work for the day was done. I had completed my part in preparing the ground for another colossal stone, another building block in the grand design of the temple. I looked towards the temple once more, its silhouette darkening against the fiery sky. The sweet scent of incense still hung in the air, a subtle reminder of the sacred purpose of my labors. I felt a strange kinship with this massive structure, a connection forged in sweat and toil, a bond formed through shared purpose.
The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the already baked earth to shimmering dust. My muscles ached, a dull, persistent throb that mirrored the rhythmic thud of countless hammers echoing across the temple grounds. Dust, fine and pervasive, coated my throat, making each swallow a gritty reminder of the relentless labor. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of sweat, sun-baked stone, and the faint, sweet perfume of incense drifting from the distant temple itself. I worked alongside dozens, perhaps hundreds of others, all equally dwarfed by the sheer scale of the project. We moved as one, a silent, sweating mass, each man a tiny cog in the vast machine of creation. The work was unending, a cycle of lifting,
carrying, leveling, and repeating. There was no conversation, only the rhythmic clang of tools and the occasional grunt of exertion. The silence, however, was not peaceful. It was oppressive, a suffocating blanket woven from exhaustion and the weight of the task before us. My hands, raw and blistered, felt the rough texture of the earth beneath my calloused fingertips. My back screamed in protest with every heave of the heavy mud brick, a constant reminder of the toll this work was taking. My throat felt parched, my tongue thick and swollen. I longed for the cool shade of a date palm, for a moment's respite from the relentless sun. But there was no respite. The work pressed on, relentless and unforgiving. The only variation in the monotony was the occasional shriek of a foreman, his voice lost in the vastness of the construction site. I felt insignificant, a tiny grain of sand in the immensity of the undertaking. Then, a flicker of movement. A figure, draped in crisp white linen, approached, a stark contrast to my dust-caked clothes and sweat-streaked face. They moved with an unhurried grace, their footsteps barely disturbing the fine dust. The figure held out a water skin, cool and smooth against my parched hands. The simple act was a revelation. The cold water, after the hours of baking sun, was more than a drink. It was life itself. They also offered a piece of dried fruit, a date, sweet and chewy, that burst with flavor upon my tongue. It was a small gift, a gesture of kindness amidst the harshness of the labor. Their words were few, spoken in a low, soothing voice, their meaning lost on me, but their presence was comforting, a quiet reassurance in the deafening silence. For a moment, the weight of the task lessened, replaced by a quiet gratitude for this unexpected kindness. The figure, their face mostly obscured by shadow, did not linger. Their departure was as quiet as their arrival. Their brief presence, however, left behind a lingering warmth, like the faint scent of incense on the breeze. It was a small act, a mere drop in the ocean of labor, yet it was enough to momentarily restore my spirits, to give me the strength to continue. The sun continued its relentless assault. The work resumed its monotonous cycle, but I had found a small, unexpected moment of grace amidst the harsh reality of building the pharaoh's temple. The sun beat down relentlessly, turning the dust to shimmering haze. The air, thick with the smell of sweat and sun-baked mud bricks, clung to my throat. My muscles ached. My hands, raw from hours of mixing mortar, felt like they'd been scraped raw against 1,000 stones. The rhythmic thud of mallets striking stone, the usual soundtrack of our labor, was punctuated by a different sound, a sharp, brittle crack. It echoed across the vast expanse of the temple construction site, a sound that cut through the usual cacophony like a knife. A shout followed, a raw cry of alarm that sliced through the air, instantly silencing the steady rhythm of work. My heart lurched. I looked up, my gaze drawn to a towering stack of massive limestone blocks, almost as tall as the half-finished temple itself. Panic clawed at my throat. I saw it then, a jagged fissure snaking across one of the lower stones, widening with each tremor of the unsteady pile. Dust showered down like pale snow, and the entire structure seemed to shudder, poised on the brink of a catastrophic collapse. Men were scrambling, their movements frantic and disorganized, their shouts swallowed by the growing roar in my ears. The fear was visceral, a cold dread that gripped my chest and constricted my breathing. It wasn't just the threat of death, though that loomed large. It was the years of work, the slow, painstaking progress, all threatened by a single catastrophic failure. It was the thought of the countless other workers, their lives hanging in the balance. I saw a foreman, his face pale with terror, gesturing wildly, trying to organize the chaotic retreat. Others were running, desperately attempting to pull away loose stones, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and grim determination. But the stack was immense, precariously balanced, and the potential devastation seemed too large for any human intervention. The air crackled with tension, a palpable sense of impending doom hanging heavy above the dust and sweat. I joined the fleeing workers, propelled by a primal instinct for self-preservation, yet glancing back with a sickening fascination at the teetering mass of stone. The ground trembled under my feet, amplifying the tremor of the precarious stack. A low groan emanated from the stones, a sound that felt both ancient and terrifyingly modern. Then, just as quickly as it began, it stopped. The groaning ceased, the tremor subsided, and a heavy silence settled over the construction site. A collective sigh of relief swept through the workers, punctuated by the ragged gasps of those who'd been closest to the impending collapse. The foreman, face still etched with strain, began to bark orders, directing a small team to carefully assess the damaged section of the wall, their movements now measured, precise, and purposeful. The sun continued its relentless march across the sky. The dust settled, and the work, slowly, cautiously, began again. But the memory of that shattering crack, that sudden, terrifying possibility of destruction, remained etched in my memory, a stark reminder of the precariousness of our efforts. The smell of dust and fear lingered in the air, heavy and persistent, a grim undercurrent to the familiar smell of sweat and limestone.
The sun beat down relentlessly, turning the already baked earth into an oven. Dust, thick and gritty, clung to my throat, coating my tongue with a taste of sand. My shoulders ached, a familiar dull throb that mirrored the rhythmic clang of the mallets against the stone. We hauled, a silent, sweating mass of men, the ropes biting into our calloused hands. The massive stone, a monstrous gray behemoth, groaned under our collective effort. Each step was a struggle, each breath a labor. For hours, the only sounds had been the grunts and groans of exertion, the creak of the sledge, and the rhythmic thud of countless feet moving in unison. It was a hypnotic drone, a relentless rhythm that matched the throbbing in my temples. Then it changed. A low, mournful chant, unlike the usual work songs, drifted from a group of workers further down the site. It was a different rhythm, a slower, more somber tune. It wasn't the call and response of the hauling teams, the shared effort to move the colossal stones. This was something else, something filled with a deeper sadness, a longing that resonated deep within me. The chant snagged at something buried deep within my memory, a half-forgotten melody. It reminded me of evening prayers, the hushed voices of my family gathered in our small mud-brick home, the flickering lamplight casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. I could almost smell the scent of wood smoke and simmering stew, feel the comforting warmth of my wife's hand in mine, see the sleepy faces of my children nestled together.
The contrast between the harsh reality of my present and the vivid memory of my home was stark and painful. Here, under the relentless sun, surrounded by dust and sweat and the endless grind of labor, the chant was a stark reminder of everything I had left behind. My heart ached with a sudden, sharp pang of longing. It was a homesickness that transcended simple physical absence. It was a yearning for the familiar comfort of my family, for the peace I felt in the small world they created. I glanced at my fellow laborers. Their faces, usually stoic and focused, were clouded with a similar weariness. Their eyes seemed to hold a reflection of my own pain, a shared burden of separation and toil. For a moment, the rhythm of the work slowed, the usual grunts and groans replaced by the shared silence of our unspoken grief. The chant continued, a low, mournful dirge weaving its way through the air. It served as a stark reminder of the countless families separated by this endless task, of the sacrifices made in the name of the pharaoh's grand designs. It was a reminder of my own sacrifice, of the long days and nights spent far from the warmth of my family, a sacrifice shared by every man toiling under the unforgiving sun. The heat became almost unbearable, the weight of the stone pressing down not just on my shoulders, but on my spirit. Yet with every mournful note, a quiet strength also grew within me. This journey, this sacrifice was for them, and I would endure for them.
A sudden, sharp cry pierces the air. A thin, reedy sound, swallowed almost instantly by the vastness of the temple grounds. It's followed by a jarring thud, the heavy, dull impact of something large and solid hitting the earth. For a moment, the relentless ache in my back, the burning in my throat, the weariness that clung to me like a shroud, all of it fades. The world shrinks, focusing on that single, terrifying sound. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I glance up, my eyes scanning the towering walls of unfinished stone, searching for the source of the commotion. Dust motes dance in the weak sunlight, filtering through the gaps between the massive blocks. The air, usually thick with the smell of sweat and sun-baked earth, is suddenly sharp with the metallic tang of blood. My breath catches in my throat. Fear, cold and clammy, grips my chest. The cries continue, now a chorus of panicked shouts and gasps. Men are running, their movements jerky and uncontrolled. A tide of brown robes and dust-caked skin surging across the uneven ground. I push my way through the throng, propelled by a primal urge to understand, to help, to escape the suffocating grip of dread. The cries grow louder as I near the source of the disturbance, a cacophony of fear and pain. I reach the edge of a partially constructed wall, a dizzying height of roughly hewn stone. There, lying sprawled amidst a pile of rubble, is a fellow worker. He's young, I think, barely a man, his face pale and contorted in pain. A section of the wall, a carelessly placed block perhaps, has given way, crushing him beneath its weight. Blood blooms darkly on his tunic, staining the dust a gruesome crimson. Several men are already around him, their faces etched with concern and helplessness. One, older and stronger than the rest, is attempting to pry loose the fallen stone, his grunts of exertion punctuated by the moans of the injured man. Another frantically searches for water. The air is thick with the smell of blood and fear, a sickening combination that makes my stomach churn. My own hands, calloused and blistered from years of labor, tremble as I reach out to assist. It feels strangely insignificant, offering my help against such immense weight, this raw, brutal force of nature that has claimed another victim in the relentless march of the temple's construction. The weight of the stone is staggering, an immovable monument to the folly of human endeavor. Yet I cannot stand idly by. We work together, a silent symphony of strained muscles and grunts, to shift the rock, inch, agonizing inch. The collective effort, the shared anxiety, binds us together in a desperate act of survival. Slowly, painstakingly, we free him. He is badly injured, but alive. Relief washes over me, a wave so intense that I nearly stumble. The fear remains, a lingering chill at the edges of my consciousness, a stark reminder of the ever-present dangers. But for now, the immediate threat is past. The sun is dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, a vibrant contrast to the stark reality of human fragility.
As darkness blankets the construction site, the scent of roasting meat, rich and savory, drifts on the evening breeze. It's a welcome interruption to the usual dust and sweat, a fragrant promise of warmth and respite. The air, still thick with the day's heat, begins to cool, carrying with it the faint sounds of the day's work slowly winding down. The rhythmic clang of hammers and the grunts of exertion fade, replaced by the quieter hum of conversation and the crackling of a fire nearby. My weary muscles ache, a familiar dull throb that settles deep in my bones. My hands, raw and blistered, instinctively rub against each other, a soothing, almost unconscious act. The firelight flickers, casting dancing shadows on the faces of my fellow workers as they gather around it. They are a varied lot, each bearing the marks of their labor, sun-baked skin, calloused hands, and weary eyes. Yet, in the shared glow of the fire, there's a sense of camaraderie, a silent understanding born of shared hardship. Someone offers a chunk of roasted meat, its surface glistening with juices. The taste is rich and satisfying, a stark contrast to the usual coarse bread and watered-down beer. It's a simple pleasure, yet it feels immensely precious. The conversation begins quietly, a murmur of voices weaving together like threads in a tapestry. Stories are exchanged, tales of family and home, of hopes and fears. One man speaks of his children, their laughter echoing in his voice even as he describes the long hours he spends away from them. Another speaks of his aging mother, his worry etched onto his face. And I too find myself sharing my own quiet anxieties, the gnawing uncertainty about the duration of this work. The words are simple, the emotions shared universally. Laughter erupts, a spontaneous, unrestrained sound that cuts through the quiet night. A simple joke, something trivial, yet it carries with it the weight of shared experience, the release of tension accumulated over long days of back-breaking toil. It's a brief moment of levity, a temporary escape from the harsh reality of our lives. The fire begins to die down, the embers glowing red in the deepening darkness. The conversation slows, becoming a quiet murmur as exhaustion claims its due. The shared meal, the stories, and the laughter have eased the weight of our burden, if only for a short time. Yet the knowledge of tomorrow's labor, the endless cycle of work that awaits us, hangs heavy in the air, a quiet reminder of our reality. Still, there is a profound sense of comfort in the shared silence, the unspoken bond that unites us, a fellowship forged in the heat of the sun and the weariness of the day. The stars above, countless and immense, seem to mirror the vastness of our task and the quiet strength of the human spirit enduring.
The flickering lamplight cast long shadows across the rough-hewn timbers of the makeshift shelter. The air, still thick with the dust of the day, held a faint, earthy sweetness from the nearby fields. My muscles, aching and stiff from hours of hauling stone, throbbed with a dull, insistent rhythm. I'd managed to find a relatively comfortable spot amongst the piles of discarded rope and broken tools, and a surprising sense of peace had settled over me. The sounds of the construction site, the distant clang of hammers, the occasional grunt of exertion had faded into a muted background hum, almost lulling me into a light doze. My eyelids felt heavy, the day's work pressing down on me like the massive stones we'd moved. Then a sudden, sharp whistle pierced the night air, slicing through the quiet like a knife. It was the signal. The night watch was beginning, the change of shift. The peaceful reverie shattered, replaced by a jolt of alertness. My body stiffened, the comfortable warmth of slumber replaced by the chill of the desert night. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, the rough texture of the wood digging into my back. The whistle was followed by a chorus of groans and shuffles as other workers roused themselves from their uneasy rest. There was a rustling of woven mats being rolled up, the clinking of metal tools being secured, the low murmur of greetings exchanged in the darkness. I could hear the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of approaching feet, the steady cadence of men moving in unison, replacing the outgoing crew. One by one, the figures emerged from the shadows, their faces weary but resolute. They moved with a practiced efficiency, their movements honed by months, perhaps years of this same routine. I recognized some of them, the strong, silent man with the scarred hands, the younger one who always hummed a tuneless melody, the older man who told stories of his home village. We exchanged brief nods, weary smiles, little more than a shared acknowledgement of our mutual exhaustion. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a silent brotherhood forged in the sweat and toil of our shared labor. The incoming crew took over their designated posts, their familiar movements filling the space that my outgoing team were leaving behind. The older man, passing me, gave a knowing grunt and patted my arm. I felt the weight of his hand, a familiar callus tracing the line of my own. It wasn't an act of sympathy, but simply acknowledgement of a shared, unrelenting reality, a grim solidarity found in the common exhaustion of their collective endeavor. I watched them as they settled in, and a profound sense of relief washed over me. I was free to turn to my small shared lodging and rest. The night air was cool against my skin, a welcome change from the oppressive heat of the day. The stars blazed in the inky sky, vast and indifferent to our struggles. As I walked toward my meager shelter, the temple loomed large in the darkness, a silent testament to the relentless efforts of countless men like myself. The weight of the day eased slightly, but the knowledge of tomorrow's work remained. Yet a slight sense of peace remained,
a quiet contentment born of shared purpose and the simple satisfaction of completing a day's labor in this grand project. The dust clung to my throat, a gritty reminder of the day's labor. My legs, heavy with fatigue, carried me along the familiar path, each step a testament to the relentless effort of the past months. The sun, a molten orange ball sinking behind the horizon, cast long shadows that danced with the dust devils swirling across the parched earth. The air, still thick with the smell of sun-baked clay and distant wood smoke, offered little respite from the heat clinging to my skin. Reaching my small mud brick dwelling, a simple structure barely larger than a man's outstretched arms, I pushed open the low door. The interior, cool and dark compared to the outside, smelled faintly of damp earth and dried herbs. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, focusing on the familiar arrangement of my meager possessions: a worn sleeping mat, a clay pot, a few tools. And then I saw it. On the mat, nestled amongst the folds of the rough woven fabric, sat a small bowl. Inside, nestled amongst the dried leaves, lay a handful of dates, their dark, glossy skins gleaming in the fading light. The sweetness of them hung in the air, a surprising and unexpected fragrance in this dusty place, a poignant contrast to the gritty bread and watered-down beer that had sustained me for so long. A wave of emotion washed over me, unexpected and intense. It wasn't just the sweetness of the dates, although that was a welcome sensation on my parched tongue. It was the gesture, the kindness of the unknown hand that had placed them there. It was the thoughtfulness, the silent act of caring in a world where such gestures were rare. My mind drifted back to my family, to the warmth of my small home, to the simple meals shared around a flickering lamp. I pictured my wife's gentle smile, the playful antics of my children, the comforting routine of our daily lives. A profound homesickness gripped me, a deep ache in my chest that echoed the weariness in my bones. The dates, small as they were, felt like a connection to that life, a tangible link to the world I had left behind. They were a reminder of the sweetness of home, a small beacon of warmth in the vast emptiness of my present circumstances. They were a silent message of hope, a whispered promise that even in this harsh land, kindness could flourish. I sat down on the mat, the rough fabric scratching against my calloused skin. I ate the dates slowly, savoring each one, letting the sweetness linger on my tongue. With each bite, a fragment of my former life returned, filling the emptiness within. The small act of kindness, this simple gift, had somehow bridged the distance, rekindling a flame of hope in the heart of a weary man. As I finished the last date, a profound sense of gratitude settled over me, a quiet contentment that transcended the physical exhaustion. The rough-spun blanket felt scratchy against my skin, but the coolness of the night air was a welcome relief after the day's scorching heat. My body ached, a familiar dull throb settling in my bones, a testament to the endless lifting and hauling. The small mud brick dwelling was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a cricket. I lay on my back, staring up at the thatched roof, letting the slow rhythm of my breathing calm my racing heart. The day's work, the immense weight of the stone, the sheer scale of the temple, it all seemed to fade into the quiet of the night. My mind, usually a whirlwind of exhaustion, was strangely still. Then a faint sound drifted on the night air, a low, rhythmic chanting. It was unlike the work songs we sang during the day, a more measured, hypnotic tone. It emanated from the temple, a sound both haunting and strangely beautiful. It pulsed with a gravity that reached past the walls of my tiny dwelling, resonating deep within me. The chanting wasn't harsh, but rather a deep, sustained drone, like the low hum of a tireless machine, yet imbued with a palpable sense of reverence. Curiosity, a rare visitor in my weary state, stirred within me. What rituals were these? What unseen forces were being called upon? I'd glimpsed the priests, their faces painted, their movements deliberate and precise, but I'd never seen the heart of their ceremonies. The chanting grew louder, the rhythm more insistent. It painted pictures in my mind. Figures draped in white linen, incense curling in the dim light of the temple, hands raised in supplication. The sound drew me, not in a physical way, but something deeper, a longing to understand the power that bound together these thousands of workers, this colossal undertaking. I sat up, the rough straw mattress rustling under me. The chanting seemed to swell, filling the night air with a sense of ancient power, of a history stretching far beyond my lifetime, my family's, perhaps even beyond the pharaohs themselves. The rhythmic pulse throbbed in my chest, echoing the slow, steady beat of my heart. The heat of the day was gone, replaced by a chill that went beyond the temperature of the night. It was a spiritual chill, a feeling of insignificance in the face of something vast and unknowable. Yet within that insignificance, there was a strange sort of peace. My work, my small contribution to this monumental structure, felt connected to this mystery. My sweat, my blisters, my aching back, they weren't merely physical burdens, but offerings to this unknowable power. The chanting was almost hypnotic, drawing my mind away from the exhaustion of my body. It became a lullaby, a promise of rest, a silent affirmation of the endless cycle of labor, faith, and the slow, relentless building of a civilization. The rhythmic drone ebbed and flowed, finally fading into the night, leaving me in quiet awe, yet strangely comforted. I lay back down, the weight of the day lessening with each slow, measured breath. The chanting was gone, but the sense of wonder remained.
A sudden, sharp pain in my knee jolts me awake. It's a searing reminder of the countless hours spent hauling heavy stones, the endless strain on my joints, the relentless pounding of my feet on the unforgiving earth. The rough woven mat beneath me offers little comfort. The night air, usually a welcome respite from the day's heat, feels strangely cold against my sweat-dampened skin. I shift carefully, wincing as a fresh wave of pain shoots through my leg. My breath comes in short gasps. The darkness is absolute, broken only by the faintest glimmer of starlight filtering through the cracks in the mud brick walls of my small dwelling. The silence is profound, a stark contrast to the constant rhythmic clang of chisels and the grunts of exertion that filled my days. I can almost hear the echoing chants of the hauling teams, a phantom chorus playing in the quiet of the night. The memory of the immense stone, the weight of it pressing down on my shoulders, the burning ache in my arms is vivid and almost tangible. I reach down, gingerly probing my knee.
The swelling is already apparent, a hard, throbbing lump beneath the thin fabric of my tunic. I remember the old woman from the village, her gnarled fingers expertly applying poultices of herbs and mud to soothe aching muscles. Perhaps some of her remedies might ease this pain. But the thought of rising, of putting weight on my leg, sends another sharp pang of discomfort. I lie still, trying to ease the throbbing with slow, deep breaths. My mind wanders, drifting back to the river journey. The endless expanse of the Nile, the relentless sun beating down on the deck of the barge, the rhythmic creak of the wood beneath the colossal weight of the stone. I recall the camaraderie of my fellow sailors, the shared jokes and quiet conversations, the unspoken understanding of our shared burdens. Even the fear of the storm, the terrifying struggle to keep the barge afloat, seems almost distant now, a half-forgotten dream. Yet the pain in my knee is real, a stubborn anchor tethering me to the present. A low moan escapes my lips. This pain is more than just physical. It's a weariness that settles deep in my bones, a profound exhaustion that goes beyond the simple tiredness of muscle strain. It's the weight of months of toil, the relentless cycle of work, the unending demands of a life lived in the shadow of the pharaoh's power. I think of my family, my small mud brick house, the comforting warmth of a hearth fire. The thought brings a faint smile to my lips, but the smile quickly fades, replaced by the dull ache in my knee. Sleep seems elusive now. I try to shift my position again, searching for a less painful angle, but find no relief. The pain persists, a constant throb that echoes the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I close my eyes, trying to conjure images of peaceful repose, but all I see is the relentless sun, the dust-filled air, and the immense weight of the stone. The only constant is the pain. It is a sharp, persistent reminder that, despite the temple's grandeur, its completion, my own small part played in this mighty project, it is my body which will bear the cost long after the stone is set. The faint scent of wood smoke, carrying the aroma of roasting meat and spiced herbs, drifted in from a nearby village, pulling me from the sharp, insistent pain in my knee. It wasn't a strong smell, just a whisper on the evening air, but it was enough. It unlocked something deep within me, a forgotten memory, a taste almost on my tongue. It was the smell of my mother's cooking. My mother? I hadn't thought of her in days, weeks maybe. The relentless rhythm of the work, the unending strain on my body had pushed everything else aside. The ache in my back, the blisters on my hands, the constant thirst. These were my companions, my reality. But the scent of wood smoke, that familiar, earthy fragrance, mingled with the sweetness of roasting meat and something spicy, something comforting, brought her back. I could almost see her bent over the clay oven, her hands deftly turning the spit, her face etched with the lines of worry and work, yet radiating a warmth that filled our small mud brick home. I closed my eyes, letting the memory wash over me. The warmth of the fire, the crackling sounds, the low murmur of conversation as my father returned from the fields. The simple meal of roasted lamb, seasoned with herbs I couldn't name but knew by their fragrance. The taste of that lamb, rich and savory, still lingered faintly on my memory. It was a world away from the gritty bread and watered-down beer that constituted our sustenance here. A world away from the harsh reality of endless toil under the unforgiving sun. A wave of homesickness, fierce and sudden, crashed over me. It wasn't just the smell, it was the sound, too. In my mind's ear, I heard the familiar sounds of my village, the bleating of goats, the chatter of children playing, the rhythmic thump of the water wheel. It was a vibrant tapestry of sounds, a stark contrast to the monotonous clang of chisels and the grunts of exertion that filled my days here. I shifted slightly, the movement sending a fresh wave of pain through my knee. The reality of my situation crashed back. The rough ground beneath me, the cold night air, the distant hum of activity from the temple construction site. But the memory, the smell, the feeling remained. It was a lifeline, a small spark of warmth in the cold darkness, a reminder of a life I hoped to return to, a life beyond the endless labor, beyond the fear, beyond the pain. Perhaps, I thought, the next time the scent of wood smoke reached me, it would be from the oven in my own home. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wood smoke further away, but the memory remained, a quiet comfort in the harsh reality of my existence. I looked towards the faint glow of the village lights, a promise of warmth, and maybe, just maybe, a bit more than gritty bread for my next meal. The pain in my knee lingered, a dull throb against the quiet intensity of my longing. But for now, the memory of my mother's cooking was enough to ease the ache, if only for a little while.
The wind, sharp and biting, sliced through my thin tunic. The setting sun cast long, skeletal shadows across the uneven ground, exaggerating the already formidable piles of stone that surrounded me. My body ached, a dull, persistent throb that resonated from my shoulders down to my knees. The work had been relentless, the hours blurring into a monotonous cycle of lifting, hauling, and maneuvering those colossal blocks. Even the rhythmic clang of the mallets, once a familiar comfort, now grated on my frayed nerves. A profound weariness settled over me, a weight heavier than any stone I'd ever moved. My stomach rumbled, a hollow echo of the meager meal I'd eaten hours ago. I sat down heavily on a rough-hewn stone, the cold seeping through my worn clothing. The dust, which had coated my skin for days, felt like a second skin, gritty and uncomfortable. I tried to rub my eyes, but my hands, raw and blistered from the relentless work, only managed to worsen the stinging. The night was falling quickly, promising a biting cold that would penetrate even to my bones. I shivered, not just from the cold, but from a deep, bone-deep exhaustion. Hope felt distant, a flicker in the vast darkness. I wondered if I'd ever feel warm again, or taste anything besides dust and the bitter aftertaste of watered-down beer. Then, a shadow fell across me. I looked up, blinking against the fading light. A lone figure stood over me, their form indistinct in the twilight. They were cloaked in heavy, dark fabric, their face mostly hidden. Yet, even from this distance, I sensed a kindness, a quiet compassion that cut through the chilling wind. Slowly, the figure approached, their movements deliberate and unhurried. They knelt beside me, their presence both comforting and strangely unsettling. There was no spoken word, no intrusive question, just a quiet, unspoken empathy that washed over me, softening the edges of my despair. With a gentle movement, the figure unfolded a heavy, dark cloak, the wool thick and soft against my skin. It was warm, a surprising burst of comforting heat against the encroaching chill. I wrapped the cloak around my shoulders, letting the warmth seep into my chilled bones. The simple act, the quiet gesture, seemed to lift the crushing weight from my chest. Next, the figure offered a bowl, the aroma of warm broth rising to meet me. The steam was visible in the cool air, the scent a rich mixture of herbs and spices, something both familiar and deeply comforting. I accepted the bowl gratefully, my trembling hands almost dropping it. The broth was hot, soothing, and flavorful. With each swallow, the gnawing hunger in my stomach eased, replaced by a gentle warmth that spread from my belly to my limbs. As I ate the broth, the figure remained beside me, silent but present. Their presence was a silent comfort, a reassurance in the vast, lonely expanse of the construction site. There was no judgment in their gaze, only an understanding of the hardship, the exhaustion, and the simple human need for kindness. In the stillness, as the last of the broth warmed my insides, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, a quiet hope blooming in the desolate landscape of my weariness. The loneliness hadn't disappeared entirely, but it felt less daunting, less absolute. I felt cared for, seen, acknowledged in my silent suffering. The warmth of the cloak, the nourishment of the broth, and the unspoken compassion of the stranger filled me with a strength I hadn't known I possessed.
The air hung heavy and still, the only sound the gentle lapping of the Nile against the barge's hull. Stars, countless and impossibly bright, glittered in the inky black above. My fellow sailors slept soundly, their breaths slow and even, a rhythm against the quiet night. I, however, could not sleep. My body ached, a familiar weariness settling deep in my bones, but it wasn't the physical pain that kept me awake. A distant, mournful wail, unlike any funeral cry I'd heard before, cut through the night. It wasn't a sharp, sudden sound, but a long, drawn-out keening that seemed to rise and fall with the breath of the wind itself. It sent a shiver down my spine, a prickling unease that had nothing to do with the chill of the night air. It was a sound that spoke of sorrow, of loss, of something ancient and profound. I sat up, the rough-woven mat scratching against my skin. The wail continued, a haunting melody that seemed to weave itself into the fabric of the night. I looked towards the shore, the dark silhouette of trees and distant hills barely visible against the star-strewn sky. Where did that sound come from? What sorrow had given birth to such a mournful cry? The Nile, usually a soothing presence, felt vast and unknowable tonight. Its dark surface mirrored the stars, reflecting their cold light in a way that felt oddly menacing. The usual comforting sounds of the river, the gentle lapping of water, the occasional croaking of frogs, were swallowed by the pervasive wail. It resonated within me, a deep vibration in my chest, as if the very ground beneath the barge were trembling with grief. I thought of the stone, our colossal burden, now resting quietly on the barge. It had been with us through sun-scorched days and torrential rain, a silent witness to our struggles and shared fears. Had it felt the same unease I felt now? Did it carry with it the weight of some unknown history, some forgotten tragedy? The thought felt strange, almost mystical, yet not entirely impossible. This land, this river, this ancient civilization felt steeped in a history older and deeper than I could comprehend. I considered my own life, the simplicity of it, the rhythm of work and rest, the hope for a future for my family. Yet, here, in the heart of the night, surrounded by the vastness of the river and the weight of the unseen, my existence felt small and insignificant. The mournful cry seemed to encompass not just a single life or death, but an entire tapestry of lives lost, forgotten, or overshadowed by the relentless march of time. It was a sound that made the vastness of time and the immensity of human experience keenly felt. The wailing continued, a sad song weaving its way into the very fabric of my being, reminding me of the smallness of my contribution, yet the importance of my perseverance within the grand scheme of things. The silence that followed was not a peaceful one, but heavy with the weight of the unspoken, a vast and mysterious emptiness echoing the ancient wail. I lay back down, the chilling cry still ringing in my ears, the weight of the stone, both physical and spiritual now. I could not shake the feeling that the journey of this stone, and my journey with it, was intertwined with something far greater than myself.
The sun, a molten coin sinking below the horizon, painted the western sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. The air, still heavy with the day's heat, began to soften, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of the Nile mud. We had finally reached the river. The relief was palpable, a physical lightness that eased the ache in my bones. My fellow sailors, their faces etched with exhaustion, moved with a renewed energy, their movements less sluggish than they'd been all day. The rhythmic clang of hammers, the grunts and shouts that had been our soundtrack for weeks, faded into a gentler hum. The barge, a precarious raft of interwoven reeds lashed together with rope, bobbed gently on the water. It was far from luxurious, but it felt like a king's bed compared to the harsh ground we'd been traversing. The scent of the Nile, a mix of damp earth and decaying vegetation, filled my nostrils, a sharp contrast to the dry dust that had clung to us for so long. The water, cool against my skin where it splashed over the edge of the barge, washed away some of the grime, bringing with it a strange sense of cleansing. The task of loading the immense stone block onto the barge was a delicate dance of muscle and precision. We used rollers made of thick tree trunks, and even then the effort was immense. Every inch gained a victory over the stone's stubborn weight. We worked in silence, the only sounds the creak of the rollers and the occasional grunt of exertion. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky ablaze with stars. The vastness above, sprinkled with diamond dust, mirrored the vastness of the river stretching before us. The night unfolded slowly.
The stars became our companions, silent witnesses to our journey. The rhythmic lapping of the water against the barge's hull, a gentle rocking motion, lulled me into a state of drowsy contentment. I shared a simple meal with my fellow sailors: coarse bread, watery beer, and a few dried fish caught earlier in the day. The conversation was quiet, mostly about our families, the homes we'd left behind, and the hopes we clung to for our return. Then sleep claimed me. It wasn't a deep, restful sleep, but rather a fitful drift in and out of consciousness. My dreams were vivid, filled with the comforting images of my family, my wife's smile, the laughter of my children, the familiar feel of my small mud brick house. I dreamt of the warmth of the hearth, the taste of my mother's cooking, the simple pleasures of a life far removed from this arduous journey. In my dreams, I felt the weight of the stone lifted, both literally and metaphorically. For a fleeting moment, I was home. But the gentle rocking of the barge, the constant whisper of the river, always tugged me back to the present, to the slow, steady journey down the Nile. The Nile's gentle rocking, a constant companion throughout the journey, had lulled me into a deep sleep. The stars, a familiar tapestry woven across the inky blackness above, felt comforting and close. The smell of river mud and damp wood was a familiar scent, almost a lullaby. Then, a sudden jarring bump against the barge's hull jolted me awake. The rhythmic creak of wood, the steady pulse of our journey, was replaced by a panicked shout from a fellow sailor, a sharp, raw cry that sliced through the night's quiet. My heart leaped into my throat. Disoriented, I fumbled for the edge of the barge, my hand grasping the rough-hewn timber. The air was thick with a sudden sharp fear, a chilling premonition of disaster. The shouts continued, overlapping and rising in pitch, a chaotic symphony of alarm. I struggled to sit up, my muscles stiff and protesting from hours of cramped rest. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the occasional spark of starlight reflecting on the swirling water. I could hear the frantic scramble of feet on the wooden deck, the strained grunts of men battling against unseen forces. The captain's voice, usually calm and measured, was now a sharp bark of commands, cutting through the din. "Starboard oars! Hard a starboard!" he roared, his voice strained with urgency. The clang of oars, usually rhythmic, was now a disjointed, desperate struggle. I strained to see through the oppressive darkness, but all I could discern was the relentless churning of the water against the barge's side. A sickening lurch threw me off balance. I grabbed onto a rope, my knuckles white against the rough fibers, feeling the barge shudder under some immense pressure. The fear was palpable, a cold hand gripping my chest. I could feel the sweat beading on my forehead despite the cool night air. The smell of fear, sharp and acrid, mingled with the familiar river scents, creating a sickening blend. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos subsided. The shouts faded into strained breaths, the frantic movement slowing to a tense stillness. The captain's voice, though still tight with strain, was more controlled now. "Hold fast, men," he ordered, his voice low and grim. "We've passed it, whatever it was." Silence descended once more, heavier and more profound than before. The rhythmic creak of wood returned, but it was a different sound now, laden with the weight of near disaster. I could hear the faint trembling in the oarsman's movements, a subtle testament to the lingering fear. The darkness seemed even deeper, more menacing, as if the unseen obstacle lurked just beyond our sight. I remained where I was, my heart still pounding, my body stiff with adrenaline, the taste of fear lingering on my tongue. The night felt different now, the familiar comfort of the river replaced by an unsettling sense of vulnerability, a reminder of the hidden dangers that lurked beneath the surface of the seemingly calm Nile. The stars above felt further away, less comforting, their light unable to penetrate the darkness that had settled within me.
The rhythmic creak of the barge's wooden hull, a constant companion for weeks, felt almost soothing now. The sun, though still high, beat down less fiercely, softened by a hazy veil that hung over the Nile. My fellow sailors, usually a tapestry of grunts and strained breaths, were strangely quiet, their faces etched with a weariness that mirrored my own. The endless expanse of water, once a source of daunting immensity, now felt almost comforting in its predictability. Then a new scent drifted across the water, carried on a gentle breeze. It wasn't the familiar earthy smell of river mud or the slightly sour tang of stale beer. This was something different, something inviting. The scent of wood smoke, thick and sweet, mingled with the savory aroma of roasting fish. A hint of unfamiliar spices, something warm and exotic, teased my nostrils. My stomach rumbled, a low growl that echoed the quiet yearning in my heart. Hunger, a constant companion on this journey, gnawed at me with a renewed ferocity. The rough bread and watered-down beer we'd been subsisting on for weeks felt like ashes in my mouth. This new smell, this promise of something richer, more satisfying, sparked a flicker of longing for a life beyond the endless toil. It was a stark contrast to the repetitive rhythm of our lives, the endless hauling, the monotonous chanting, the fear of storms and accidents. A wave of curiosity washed over me. What kind of village was this, nestled so serenely along the riverbank? What kind of lives did its inhabitants lead? Were they as worn and weary as we were? Or did they live with a different kind of rhythm, a different kind of burden? The thought of warm, spiced fish, succulent and juicy, painted a vivid picture in my mind, a stark contrast to the gritty, tasteless bread that formed the staple of our diet. The captain, sensing perhaps the collective shift in mood, allowed us a brief respite. He grunted his consent, a low rumble that barely disturbed the quiet hum of the barge. One by one, my fellow sailors followed my gaze towards the distant village, a silent understanding passing between us. The lure of that tantalizing scent, the promise of a moment's respite from the relentless labor, was too strong to ignore. We pulled the barge close to the bank, securing it with ropes as tightly as our tired hands would allow. The landing was muddy, the earth soft under our worn leather sandals. As we stepped onto the bank, the scent of wood smoke intensified, mingling with the perfume of unfamiliar flowers that grew wild along the river's edge. The village itself was small, a cluster of mud brick houses huddled together for warmth and protection.
The air thrummed with a different energy, a rhythm separate from the grueling cadence of our work. Children played in the dust, their laughter a welcome dissonance to the silent weariness that had become our constant companion. An old woman, her face etched with wrinkles that spoke of sun and wind, emerged from one of the houses. She offered us bowls of steaming stew, the fish fragrant and tender, the spices lending a warmth that seeped deep into my bones. It wasn't just food, it was a taste of normalcy, a momentary reprieve from the brutal reality of our journey. It was a reminder that life, even in its simplest form, could hold moments of unexpected beauty and kindness. As I savored the taste of the unfamiliar spices and the tender fish, I found myself gazing at the sunset, painting the Nile in fiery hues of orange and crimson. The sounds of the village, children's laughter, the murmur of conversation, the crackling of the fire, were a welcome respite from the silence of the river. For a fleeting moment, the weight of the stone, the burden of our journey, seemed lighter. The warmth of the stew, a thick, earthy broth, seasoned with herbs I didn't recognize, had been a brief respite, a stolen moment of comfort in the relentless march down the Nile. The laughter of my fellow sailors, punctuated by the rhythmic splash of oars against water, had felt almost peaceful. The conversation, low and easy, had drifted from family matters to the capricious nature of the river itself, a constant companion, a source of both life and danger. But the peace didn't last. The sky, moments ago a clear, star-studded canvas, began to darken. The wind, previously a gentle breeze cooling our sweat-slicked skin, picked up, whipping across the water with increasing ferocity. The air, heavy with the scent of river mud and damp reeds, grew thick and electric. Then, with a suddenness that stole the breath from my lungs, the downpour began. It wasn't a gentle rain, it was a deluge. Water cascaded from the heavens, a torrential downpour that transformed the tranquil river into a churning, angry beast. The laughter died in our throats, replaced by urgent shouts. The comforting aroma of the stew was instantly replaced by the chilling rain that soaked through our thin linen garments. The warmth was gone, replaced by a bone-deep cold that seeped into my very marrow. We scrambled, a desperate flurry of movement, back onto the barge. The wooden deck, already slick with river spray, became treacherous underfoot. Each step was a gamble, a test of balance against the relentless onslaught of rain and wind. The heavy stone, our shared burden, shifted slightly under the weight of the water, sending a jolt of terror through me. I could feel the barge groan under the strain. It was a symphony of chaos, the roaring wind, the relentless rain, the panicked cries of my fellow sailors, and the creaking, groaning protest of the wooden barge fighting for its life. Our initial panic gave way to a frantic, determined efficiency. Ropes, previously loose and slack, were tightened with desperate urgency, securing the stone to the barge. Each sailor had a task, securing the sails, bailing out water, reinforcing the ropes that bound our precious cargo. We worked as one, a silent, coordinated dance against the elements, our movements guided by a shared instinct for survival. The rhythmic cries of the storm became the soundtrack to our struggle. The rain hammered down, turning the Nile into a maelstrom. The barge pitched and rolled violently, each wave threatening to swallow us whole. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped my heart. I could feel the muscles in my arms and legs screaming in protest, each movement a battle against exhaustion and the relentless storm. The taste of rain, mixed with the dust and sweat clinging to my skin, was bitter and unpleasant. The rhythmic clang of the tools we used to secure the stone was jarring, a stark contrast to the soothing sound of the oars from moments before. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a strange unity. We were all in this together, bound by the shared peril and the weight of our responsibility. The fear was real, palpable, but it was tempered by the silent determination in each man's eyes. We were fighting not only the storm, but also against the threat of failure, the potential loss of months of effort, and the devastating cost of capsizing. Each grunt, each groan, each strained muscle was a testament to our resilience, a silent affirmation of our shared purpose. As the storm raged, we clung to the barge and to each other, our shared humanity a flickering light against the overwhelming darkness. The rain, a relentless drumming on the canvas awning that barely shielded us from the deluge, began to ease. The wind, which moments before had howled like a tormented beast, sighed, dropping to a gentle whisper. The relentless downpour transitioned into a soft drizzle, the drumming replaced by a gentle patter against the wooden planks of our barge. My soaked tunic clung heavy, the water squelching with every movement. My muscles, already aching from the ceaseless struggle against the storm, screamed in protest. The air, thick and heavy with the lingering scent of river mud and rain, suddenly shifted. A new aroma, faint but unmistakable, mingled with the dampness. A sweet, spicy fragrance, the unmistakable scent of incense. It wafted towards us, carried on the now gentler breeze. A wisp of something far away, yet strangely comforting. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, letting the scent fill my lungs. It was the smell of the temple, a smell I hadn't consciously noticed before, overwhelmed by the ever-present smells of sweat, exertion, and the raw Nile. But now, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, it was a beacon, a subtle promise of an end to this relentless journey. The incense, a reminder of the sanctity of the temple, whispered a silent assurance. We were almost there. The captain, his face grim but etched with relief, wiped the rain from his eyes. He looked out across the darkening water, his gaze fixed on a faint glimmer in the distance. I followed his gaze, straining my eyes against the fading light. Through the rain-blurred horizon, I could just make out a silhouette against the dusky sky. The outline of land, and beyond it, the faintest suggestion of structures. My fellow sailors stirred, their movements slow and deliberate, the exhaustion still clinging to them like the clinging dampness of our clothes. They too smelled the incense, the silent message of hope shared among us all. The rhythmic creak of the barge as it swayed gently with the receding waves sounded less threatening now, more like a gentle lullaby than a potential death rattle. A shared sigh escaped us all, a collective release of tension that had knotted our stomachs for the past several hours. We looked at each other, our faces drawn and weary, yet a glimmer of hope sparked in our eyes, reflecting the distant light of our destination. The journey had been brutal, a relentless test of our strength, our resilience, and our faith in something greater than ourselves. Yet the scent of incense promised respite, a reward at the end of our long and arduous trek. It served as a reassuring reminder that our efforts, though exhausting, had purpose. We all moved with renewed vigor, albeit slowly, our renewed strength fueled by the promise of rest, of completion, and the sweet, fragrant reminder of the temple's sanctity drawing nearer with every passing moment. The rhythmic dipping of the oars, a familiar sound once more, sounded not like a drudge, but a hopeful rhythm that echoed the beating of my own heart. The sun, a molten orange ball, sinking, affectionate, calm, deliberate pacing, low pitch, warm tone, hint of a smile, wise. The sun, a molten orange ball sinking behind the western horizon, cast long, shimmering streaks across the Nile's still surface. The air, heavy with the scent of mud and reeds, cooled pleasantly as the day surrendered to twilight. The barge, a swaying cradle of woven reeds and rough-hewn timbers, glided silently towards the shore, its progress marked only by the gentle lapping of water against its sides and the rhythmic creak of its timbers. My fellow sailors, exhausted but strangely peaceful, rested, their breathing slow and even in the fading light. A sense of anticipation, a mixture of apprehension and relief settled over me. Soon the arduous journey would be over. Soon the massive stone, our silent companion for so many weeks, would finally reach its resting place. The weight of it, both literally and figuratively, had pressed down on me constantly. It had become a part of me, a physical manifestation of the endless labor, the shared sweat, the quiet determination of so many men. Then a disturbance, a ripple in the still water, followed by a sudden rustle in the reeds lining the riverbank. A lone heron, white and gray against the darkening sky, launched itself into flight. Its powerful wings sliced through the air, creating a momentary turbulence in the serene evening. Its cry, a sharp, lonely sound, echoed across the water, a piercing note that momentarily shattered the peaceful silence. The heron's cry struck a chord within me. It wasn't just the sound itself, though its piercing quality was a stark contrast to the quietude. It was the memory it awakened, a memory of the marshes near my home, a place of quiet beauty and teeming life. I recalled watching herons like this one, their silent grace a stark counterpoint to the harsh realities of our daily lives. I remembered the slow, deliberate way they stalked their prey, the patient stillness before the swift strike. They were a symbol of resilience, of quiet strength in the face of adversity, a reflection of the unspoken endurance of our own journey. The memory brought a wave of homesickness, a sharp pang of longing for the familiar smells and sounds of my small village. I thought of my family, of my small mud brick home, of the simple comforts that were now a distant dream. But with the homesickness came a subtle shift in my emotional landscape, a quiet pride. We had done it. We had carried this enormous stone across harsh terrain and treacherous waters all the way to this place. The sheer weight of the task, the combined effort of countless men, had somehow forged a connection between us, a shared sense of purpose that transcended the individual. We were all connected. The barge gently bumped against the muddy bank, jolting me from my reverie. The sounds of the Nile were now replaced by the quiet rustling of reeds and the croaking of unseen frogs. The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the landscape into a deep twilight. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and river mud. Ahead, silhouetted against the fading light, I could make out the towering form of the temple, a colossal testament to human ambition and unwavering faith. The journey of the stone was nearing its end, and with it my own personal odyssey.
The sun, a molten orange smear on the horizon, cast long shadows across the temple. Years had bled into decades. My own body, once a tireless engine of muscle and grit, now creaked like the ancient stone itself. The temple, though, remained, imposing, magnificent, a testament to the tireless work of countless hands, including my own. I felt a tremor of pride, a faint ghost of the ache in my back, a memory of the sun beating down on my neck. The air hummed with a different energy now, no longer the sharp clang of chisels and the rhythmic chant of hauling crews. Instead, a quiet reverence permeated the space. Tourists, their faces etched with wonder, shuffled through the echoing halls. Their hushed whispers felt distant, almost unreal. They saw the grandeur, the scale, the artistry. But did they feel the weight of the stones? Did they sense the ghosts of those who had hewn them from the earth, hauled them across the land, and placed them here, one by one? I stood before the very stone I had helped to carry. It wasn't marked, of course, just another piece in the vast mosaic. A single, anonymous block amidst millions. Yet there it was, a part of me, a piece of my youth, my sweat, my fear, my faith. It held a piece of the sun-drenched quarry, the Nile's muddy embrace, the dust of the journey, the scent of temple incense. The temple, a symbol of a power far beyond my own, held a different meaning now. It wasn't just the pharaoh's might, the priest's pronouncements. It was the enduring strength of the human spirit, the quiet dignity of shared toil, the unwavering faith that moved mountains, or at least moved stones. It was the story whispered in the very stones themselves, a story of countless lives woven together in an unbreakable tapestry. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fading glory, I walked away. My footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed softly on the ancient stones. The temple remained, a silent testament to time and toil. And I, a small, unremembered part of it, carried the memory of its creation, a quiet contentment, and the deep, abiding peace that only comes with a life lived fully, anonymously, and with purpose.